This story starts the way a lot of bad stories do, with a good deal. The Lockwood family, Dad Mark, Mom Rachel, and their 11-year-old son Jonah, weren't looking for a haunted house. They were just looking for affordable. They'd outgrown their cramped apartment. The rent was climbing, Dad's hours had been cut at work, and Mom was tired of listening to the upstairs neighbors fight every night like it was a sport. So when the realtor emailed a listing for a 4-bedroom historic home 12 minutes from town, with a yard, hardwood floors, and a mortgage cheaper than the rent, it felt like a miracle. "It's a little older," the realtor admitted, flipping through her papers as they pulled up to the curb. "But it has character." Character was one way to put it. The house loomed tall and narrow, all chipped blue paint and crooked shutters, like it had been left out in the rain too long. A sagging porch wrapped around the front, and the glass in the door was old enough to warp whatever was on the other side. Jonah pressed his hand against the car window and stared up. He liked it immediately. It looked like the kind of house that had secrets. Inside, the floors creaked in a way that made every step sound important. Dust motes spun in the sunlight from the tall front windows. There was a fireplace in the living room, built-in shelves, and a narrow staircase that climbed up and turned sharply, disappearing out of sight. "Wow," Mom whispered, running her fingers along a sun-faded wallpaper pattern. "This could be beautiful." "You're sure this price is right?" Dad asked the realtor. "Not missing any zeros?" She smiled a little too wide. "Nope. The owners are very motivated to sell." Jonah drifted toward the stairs. Something about the narrow hallway at the top tugged at him. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Like it was leaning in to listen. "You all right, kiddo?" Dad called. "Yeah," Jonah answered, but he had that prickly feeling you get when you know someone's behind you, even when you're alone. He turned, and nothing there. Just the long hallway and the empty rooms waiting. They moved in at the end of August. The first night everything was loud with cardboard and tape and the whine of the moving truck pulling away. It felt like the start of something good. New rooms to claim, a backyard big enough for actual grass, and a kitchen where Mom said she might finally bake again. By 10 o'clock the house settled. By midnight, it got serious. Jonah lay awake in his new room, staring at the ceiling. The street outside was quiet. No sirens, no upstairs neighbors, no late-night arguments through the thin walls. He should have been able to sleep like a rock. Instead, he heard footsteps. Not the normal kind. This was slower, measured, like someone walking heel to toe down the hallway, then up, then down again. It had to be Dad or Mom. Maybe they couldn't sleep either. The footsteps stopped right outside his bedroom door. The doorknob didn't move. Nobody knocked. The house just waited. Jonah's mouth went dry. "Dad?" he whispered, but nothing. He squeezed his eyes shut, pulled the blanket over his head, and told himself that old wood made old noises, and he was just being stupid. Morning made it easy to laugh about. "New house," Dad said around a mouthful of cereal. "This place probably shifts and groans like crazy. You'll get used to it." Mom ruffled Jonah's hair. "Your imagination just didn't get the change of address yet." Jonah shrugged and pretended that made him feel better. He didn't mention the footsteps had sounded like they were pacing, like somebody was deciding whether or not to come in. The small things started first. A box they were sure they'd left in the living room turned up at the top of the stairs. The tap in the upstairs bathroom turned itself on, just a slow, steady drip that no one remembered leaving. The hallway light flickered whenever someone walked under it and went back to normal the second they stepped away. "Old wiring," Dad muttered, flipping the switch up and down a few times. I'll check the breaker later. One evening, Mom was unpacking dishes when Jonah wandered into the dining room and froze. The table was set. 4 plates, 4 glasses, silverware lined up neatly, napkins folded just so. He thought Mom had done it as a joke, like, "Look, we're fancy now." But when he called her in, her face changed. "I haven't touched the table," she said. Dad walked in behind her and stopped. "Okay, who's messing around?" "Not me," Jonah said. They stood there, the 3 of them, staring at the quietly perfect table. Then, one by one, the glasses started to tremble. Not much, just the faintest jitter, like someone was bumping the table in time with a heartbeat. "There's probably a truck going by," Dad said too quickly. Out front, the street was empty. They ate in the living room that night. In the second week, Jonah was halfway down the stairs for breakfast when he heard it. A whisper. Soft, right next to his ear, so close he felt the tickle of breath. "Where did you go?" He jolted, hand grabbing the banister hard enough to hurt. He spun around, but no one was there. The hallway at the top of the stairs looked the same as always. Narrow, dim, and slightly crooked, like it was bending under its own memories. "Mom?" he called. "In the kitchen," she answered, voice bright and far away. He swallowed and forced his legs to move. He didn't tell her what he'd heard. He didn't want that look adults give you when they want to believe you but don't. Over the next few days, the whisper came back. Always near the stairs. Always close. Sometimes it sounded like a kid. Sometimes it sounded like it was trying to be a kid and not quite pulling it off. "Why did you leave? Come back. You're not supposed to be here." The words slipped between floorboards and through keyholes. So quiet that if he wasn't paying attention, he could pretend it was just the house settling. But he was paying attention. The house wanted him to. Jonah started to notice patterns. The shadows in the upstairs hallways were too dark, even in daytime. The bathroom mirror fogged up, but not in random swirls. Someone was tracing shapes in the condensation before it faded. Circles, little jagged lines that looked like teeth. One night, unable to sleep, he sat up in bed and stared at his closet. The door was cracked open, and he distinctly remembered closing it. "Okay, no," he murmured, sliding out of bed. "Nope, not tonight." He crossed the room, hand reaching for the knob. Something inside the dark moved. Not a lot, just the faintest shift, like someone standing there had leaned forward, excited. Every hair on his arm stood up. He backed away slowly, grabbed his desk chair, and wedged it under the knob. The next morning, the chair was across the room by his window. The closet door was standing wide open. The first time something touched him, he was brushing his teeth. It was Saturday, sunlight through the hallway window, normal day, normal kid, foamy mouth. He spat into the sink and looked up, and in the mirror, the bathroom door behind him was just beginning to swing shut. He hadn't touched it. He turned around, heart jumping. Nothing was there. The door stopped halfway, like someone had pushed it slowly and had gotten bored. He told himself the house wasn't level. Old hinges. Draft. He turned back to the sink and bent to rinse his toothbrush. Cold fingers slid across the back of his neck. It was a soft, quick touch, not a grab, not a claw. Just a curious, almost affectionate glide of something that felt like ice and static electricity at the same time. Jonah yelped, jerking backwards. toothbrush flying into the tub. He slapped a hand on his neck. Dry. No one behind him. He stared at his reflection in the mirror. For a half second, there was another face over his shoulder. A boy. Maybe a little younger than Jonah. Wet hair like he'd climbed out of a lake. Eyes too dark, as if pupils had swallowed everything else. Then the bathroom light flickered and the mirror showed only Jonah again, wide-eyed and pale. Behind the glass, just for a heartbeat, the boy's hand pressed flat where Jonah's neck should have been. By the time Jonah screamed for his parents, the mirror was fogged over, smooth and empty. Dad searched the house room by room, attic, basement, closets, even under the porch. Mom called their realtor. "Are you sure that nothing happened in this house before we moved in?" she asked. There was a pause long enough to be an answer. "Old houses have histories," the realtor said, "but nothing, officially disclosed. You know how small towns are. Lots of stories." "What kind of stories?" "Ma'am, I really don't—" "You sold us this house," Mom snapped. "If there's something we need to know, you need to tell us." Another pause. Then, quietly, "Just look up the Wilkes family. That's all I can say." That night, after Jonah went to bed with his light on and his door firmly open, Mom and Dad sat at the kitchen table with Dad's laptop. They found the article within minutes. Local tragedy at a historic Sycamore home. No pictures, just text. 4 years old. A family of 4. Parents and 2 boys. A gas leak overnight, they said. Faulty lines. The parents and younger brother never made it out of the house. The older boy, 8 years old, survived. He was found at the top of the stairs, coughing and screaming that his brother was still in his room. That he wouldn't come when he called. That the house wouldn't let him. Mom shut the laptop with shaking hands. "We're moving," she whispered. Dad stared at the closed laptop. "We can't just pick up and go, Rach. We put everything into this place. We'd lose the down payment. We're moving," she repeated, voice rising. "I don't care about the money. Something touched our son in the bathroom, and you saw his face." Their argument spiraled, hushed and sharp through the thin kitchen walls. Upstairs in his bedroom, Jonah listened. So did the house. The air in the vents vibrated with anger, carrying every frayed word. And in the unseen spaces, between the walls, above the attic, under the floorboards, something woke up all the way. After they read about the Wilkes family, the house stopped pretending. The nights bled together into a slow, careful terror. Doors slammed themselves after you walked through them, just a fraction too late, like someone was right behind you trying to catch your heel. Lights turned on in rooms no one had entered. Once, at 3 a.m, Mom found every cabinet in the kitchen standing wide open, every drawer pulled out, silverware scattered like a metal snowfall. "Did you do this?" she whispered to Jonah, who was hovering in the doorway in his pajamas. He shook his head, eyes huge. "I heard it." "Heard what?" "Someone looking, like they were mad at the noise things make." That same week, Jonah's drawings started to change. He'd always doodled in the margins of his homework. Tiny dragons, stick figures, little cartoons. But now, more and more, he drew the house. From the outside, from the inside, hallways that stretched too long, stairs that doubled back on themselves, windows that didn't exist. In every drawing there were people, not his family. Thin shapes in doorways, figures at the end of the hall, hands resting on the banister behind a smaller boy. "Why are you drawing these?" Mom asked one afternoon, trying to keep her voice light. He stared down at the paper, "I'm not," he said. "What do you mean you're not?" "I just start, and when I look, they're already there." The same night while they slept, someone scratched along the outside of his bedroom wall. Slow, long, like fingernails on skin. The house started picking favorites. Mom's coffee mug slid a few inches across the table every time she looked away, like it was inching closer to the edge. She'd move it back, frowning, and later find it again just a breath from falling. Dad's keys vanished twice. Once they turned up in the freezer, once in the attic balanced on the very edge of a beam like someone had carefully placed them there and then waited to see how long it would take him to find them. It didn't bother Jonah like that. It spoke to him. Sometimes it was the boy, sometimes it was something else, something using the boy's voice like a mask. When Jonah walked down the hallway, the air would grow heavy, pressing against his shoulders. The floorboards under his feet would go silent for a step or two, like he was walking on held breath. "You're not them," the whisper said one afternoon, as he paused at the top of the stairs. "Who?" he whispered back before he could stop himself. The house seemed surprised. The silence sharpened, listening harder. "The ones who left," it breathed. "The ones who burned. The one who stayed." "I don't understand." "Don't go," it said urgently. "Don't leave me." The hallway light exploded, just a little pop and a shower of glass. Jonah flinched, covering his face. When he uncovered his eyes, tiny shards of bulb glittered on the floor like teeth. Mom tried to talk to someone at the church. The pastor came by one afternoon with a polite smile, a Bible, and a faint, skeptical look like he'd been told they were one of those families. He walked through each room, murmured a prayer, and placed his hand flat on the living room wall for a long moment. Then his face drained of color. "It feels crowded in here," he said softly. "What does that mean?" Mom asked. He swallowed. "I can bless the house, I can pray with you, but if I'm honest, whatever's here, it doesn't feel interested in leaving." "Can you make it go away?" Jonah asked. The pastor looked down at him, eyes kinder now. "Sometimes places hold on to pain, to people. Sometimes they just echo. I'm not sure this is an echo." "So what is it?" Dad asked. The pastor hesitated. "Hungry." They let him bless the house anyway. He sprinkled holy water along the windowsills and door frames. He prayed in each room, voice steady, even when the temperature dropped a few degrees every time he said, "And deliver us from evil." When he left, he pressed Mom's hand a second longer than necessary. "If things get worse instead of better," he said quietly, "don't wait. Call me. Or just leave." They didn't realize until that night that he'd forgotten his little silver cross on the living room side table. They found it in the morning, twisted like someone had tried to knot it with bare hands. It did get worse. The blessing was like tapping a sleeping animal with a stick. The very next night, Jonah woke up to the sound of breathing. Too loud, too close. He froze, every muscle in his body seizing. Something was standing beside his bed. He didn't see it right away. He felt it, the way you feel someone in a dark room. The air was colder on that side, heavy and thick. Slowly, heart pounding, he turned his head. For a moment, he thought it was his own reflection in the window, just a pale shape, roughly his height, standing between him and the glass. but his reflection was in bed. He could see himself, wide-eyed and terrified. The thing at the window was watching him. Its head tilted. Its face was wrong. Features smudged, like someone had started to sketch a boy and then erased parts of it. "Don't," a whispered voice like wind under a door. "Don't leave me alone." It reached for him with a hand that was all shadow and knuckle. He bolted. He launched himself out of bed, across the room and through the door, slamming it behind him. He practically flew down the hallway, feet barely touching the floor. By the time he reached his parents' room, he was sobbing. They let him sleep between them like he was 5 again. In the dark, the house listened to the 3 of them breathing in unsteady unison. Plaster cracked softly behind their bed. Down the hallway, Jonah's bedroom door slowly eased itself open. They lasted exactly 73 days. On day 69, the house tried to push Mom down the stairs. She didn't fall, but only because she grabbed the railing in time, knuckles going white as her heels slid off the edge of a step that suddenly seemed to tilt under her weight. On day 71, Dad woke up to a voice whispering inches from his ear. "It should have been you." He turned on every light in the bedroom and left them on until morning. On day 72, all the taps in the house turned themselves on at once. Sinks, tub, the washing machine started to fill. The sound of water rushing through the old pipes roared like a crowd. Jonah waded through the hallway, ankles in cold water, as Mom and Dad scrambled to shut everything off. The house felt pleased, like it was practicing. That night, Dad sat down at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. "We're done," he said. "I don't care about the money. I don't care what we lose. I'm not letting this place get a chance to do to us what it did to them." Mom nodded, tears in her eyes. "We'll pack what we can, leave the rest." Jonah watched them, relief and dread tangled tight in his chest. "What if it doesn't let us go?" he asked. The house tilted its head, listening. Day 73 started like any other. Gray sky, low clouds, the air heavy and damp like the world was holding its breath. They packed frantically, stuffing clothes in the trash bags, tossing essentials in the cardboard boxes, not bothering to label anything. The plan was simple: to get out, stay at a motel, and figure it out from there. Around noon, while Dad wrestled with a box in the trunk of the car and Mom taped up one last carton of dishes, Jonah went back inside to grab his backpack. He'd left it in his room next to the bed. The second he stepped onto the stairs, he felt it. The shift. The house went quiet in a new way. Not the normal hush of an empty hallway. This was the silence you get in the split second before lightning hits the ground. Halfway up, the third step flexed under his foot like it was breathing. "Okay," he muttered. "Just grab the bag and go. We're leaving. It's over." The hallway at the top of the stairs seemed longer than usual. The light bulb in the ceiling fixture flickered faintly. His bedroom door was open just a crack. He reached out with shaking fingers and pushed it wider. Everything was where he'd left it. Half-made bed, posters on the wall, backpack on the floor. And on the pillow, a second backpack. Old and faded, the fabric stiff with age, a little blue rocket ship patch peeling off the front. He knew without touching it that it wasn't his. The room's temperature dropped. His breath fogged in front of him. Behind him, the bedroom door eased shut. "Don't go," the voice said. It wasn't a whisper now. It was all around him, in his ears, his chest, his teeth. "Don't leave me again." The backpack flew off the bed and slammed into the wall beside him, bursting open. Old, charred notebooks skittered across the floor. The light blew out. The dark that replaced it was thick and full of faces. Hands, cold and invisible, pushed him backward. Not hard enough to throw him, just enough to steer him away from the door. Downstairs he could hear his parents yelling his name, muffled, distant, like they were shouting through a tunnel. "Jonah! Let's go, Jonah!" He tried to scream back, but his voice came out thin and useless. "Stay," the house said. Or the boy, or all of them at once. "Stay, stay, stay." The bedroom walls pulsed, shadows stretching long fingers across the floor. He felt something grip his ankles. For one blind, wild second, he saw it. The boy from the mirror, eyes huge and burning with desperate loneliness, clinging to Jonah's legs like he was the last branch over a cliff. Behind the boy, darker shapes crowded the corners. Taller, their features blurred and shifting like smoke, watching. They weren't trying to scare him now. They were trying to keep him. "Let go!" Jonah screamed, kicking out. "I'm not your brother. I'm not him." For a heartbeat, the grip loosened. The boy flinched like he'd been slapped. The shadows behind him surged forward, angry and hungry. The floor tilted. The house seemed to take in a breath. Then something else cut through the panic. Dad's voice, raw, furious in a way Jonah had never heard it before. "You can't have my son." The door slammed open. A light knifed into the room from the hallway. Dad barreled in like a linebacker, crashing through the thick air like it was water. He grabbed Jonah around the chest and yanked. And for a split second, Jonah felt the house fight back. A tug on his legs, a pressure in his lungs, a scream that wasn't his ricocheting off the walls. Then they broke free. Dad half dragged, half carried him down the hallway. The floor bucked under their feet like it was trying to throw them off. Picture frames flung themselves from the walls, glass shattering. At the top of the stairs, the air went ice cold. "Run!" Mom yelled from below, arms outstretched. They did. Behind them, the house roared, not with sound, but with every pipe, beam, and nail vibrating in furious, frustrated unison. The banister shook, the stairs flexed. One of the steps cracked clean through as Dad's foot left it. They hit the bottom and stumbled into the foyer. The front door slammed itself shut in their faces. For a second, they were trapped in the small, warped glass space, like flies under a cup. The air smelled like gas. Mom grabbed the doorknob. It burned her palm, but she twisted anyway, screaming, "Let us out." Then the lock clicked. The door flew open so hard it hit the siding. They spilled onto the porch. Behind them, the house went completely still. No creaks, no whispers, just the soft hiss of gas lines deep inside the walls. Dad didn't wait. He shoved them into the car, hands shaking, and jammed the keys into the ignition. As they pulled away from the curb, tires squealing, Jonah pressed his face to the window, breath fogging the glass. The house watched them go. In the upstairs window over the porch, a small figure stood perfectly still. The boy. He wasn't hazy now. He wasn't smudged. For the first time, Jonah could see him clearly. Wet hair, pale face, eyes too dark. He didn't look angry. He looked abandoned. As the car turned the corner, the figure lifted one hand in a slow, hopeless wave. Then the house blinked. The window went empty, and the Lockwoods didn't look back again. They never lived in another old house. They never went back to Sycamore Street. Not to talk to it, not to get closure. The few things they left behind stayed there. Some nights, in their new apartment, Jonah still woke up to the feeling of someone standing by his bed. He always turned on the light fast, just to be sure. It was never the boy. Whatever was in that house stayed where it was, waiting. The town never got rid of the property. Too expensive to tear down, too weird to keep renting out for long. People moved in, lasted a while, and then moved out, sometimes in the middle of the night. The listing goes up about once a year. Charming historic home, 4 bedrooms, great potential, motivated sellers. If you ever go house hunting near Sycamore and 11th, maybe you'll see it. Big blue house, crooked shutters, for sale sign on the lawn. If you slow down and look at the upstairs window, you might see a face watching you. If you're smart, you'll keep driving. If you're not, well, the house is always looking for someone new to stay. Thank you for spending your night with me in the dark. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Midnight Delight, and leave a comment telling me, would you stay one night in that house if the price was right? Sleep lightly tonight. You never really know who else is living in your house, even after you move in.